Hey everyone, it's Kandace and Sher with Processing Trauma Out Loud. We're back and we're still together. So we are excited to be together. Like we said last week, Sher came to visit from Minneapolis. And Sher, we kind of took on a heavy topic last week.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, how are you feeling about it?
I feel like it's a good topic because we are rubbing shoulders with people who are in this situation. And that's kind of what we're about on this podcast is we're talking about the real things.
Yeah.
And it is a hard topic. And yet I know powerlessness in my story and you know powerlessness in your story. And so I think, I don't think it can be talked about too much.
Yeah. So last week we talked about power, specifically powerlessness. And one of the things that Sher and I were both told at the beginning of our story work journey is that story work can be disruptive. I didn't really know what they quite meant. Did you?
No.
So I know people who are criticizing story work, and that's okay. They can criticize whatever the heck they want.
Yeah.
That's their right. But I want to say this. Story work can be easy to criticize if you think disruption is always bad.
Yeah.
If you think staying in the status quo just to keep things nice and pretty on the outside, you're not going to like story work probably.
Yeah.
But if you want to get to authenticity, healing, uncovering the unconscious belief systems that are drivers for the purpose of healing.
Yeah.
We know lots of people who are finding that through story work.
Yeah.
And we're not worshiping story work.
No.
But we are saying it's been an effective modality for many people who have been in torment at times over why things keep happening the way they do throughout their life.
Right.
And it's going to come back to some sense of what they believe about their power.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. Including us, right? Mm-hmm. Story work has been very disruptive. And we just did, over the summer, we did 4 episodes on how some of the ways our lives have changed because we've done story work. And so, boy, has it been disruptive? Yes. And would I want to go back to who I was before I started this? No. I've experienced such significant growth and change and freedom and love and goodness that, nope, bring on the disruption.
And I think some people have a little more space to do that.
Yeah.
I know stories where the disruption, there was a high price to pay.
Yeah. Well, and I want to say that because I feel like that's really key, that we were in an environment where we have been disrupted and we have care. We have people around us who can contain us when we're disrupted, which is also really huge because when we get disrupted, it is hard. And when we're talking about this issue of powerlessness, like being powerless has felt dangerous, and being powerful can also feel dangerous. Trying to utilize our power or trying to speak up and use our voice or ask for what we need, that can feel dangerous too. So yeah, it can be a bind.
Yeah, well, so the disruption is that we're coming out of certain roles that we've played. Okay.
Yep.
And those roles have worked, like you said last week.
Yep.
And so when someone's coming out of a role because of healing, and that's what I really want to emphasize.
Yeah.
This is not someone is trying to be mean, if you will. It's someone's healing and they're like, oh, what I feel and what I think does matter.
Yeah.
So when they come out of that role, it can be a shock to the system, to the other people that have played in this role. And we get that. We actually have a lot of compassion for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Like we don't get mad at the people who are like, what's happening with you?
Yeah. Right. And and I actually encourage people a lot to recognize, like, you are the one who's changing the rules of the system. What, like, when we make changes, for example, if I start using my voice and saying no or asking for what I need, and my spouse gets upset about that or feels like, what's going on? Who do you think you are, or whatever? Not that that's okay. But to recognize that we are the ones who are changing the rules of the system, and there is going to be disruption. And if we can stay engaged and see it through with the hope that there's so much better that can come.
Yeah. One of the things that I liked about what we were invited into is sometimes we think this means that we're showing up making threats. We're showing up making ultimatums. Here's what we're doing. We're slowing down. We're connecting with what's true, good, and right, and that we know.
Yeah.
And then we're offering invitations.
Yeah.
Like we're offering, I want to get this part about the dynamics of our relationship healthy in order that we have mutual respect, we have mutual honor, we have mutual shared power.
Yeah.
And if somebody doesn't want to meet us there,
Right.
we have to decide what we can tolerate and what we can't.
Right. Yeah. And I like that you mentioned mutuality. And that's one of the things that we really wanted to talk about, that when we are stuck in a place where we feel powerless, there are some things that feel really impossible. One is boundaries. It's very, very difficult to set a boundary where we will tell someone, here's my line. It's not okay to cross my line. If you cross my line, here's the consequence. And it can feel mean. It can feel bad. It can feel all the things to when we have been accustomed to not setting boundaries, the thought of setting a boundary can feel really like we're being the one who's being bad.
Yeah. And I want to go back to even the way you set that up. That's not a threat. That's an invitation to stay connected.
Right. Yes. Boundaries are invitations to stay connected. Exactly. Let's just leave it at that. It's not meant to be a wall to keep the other person out. It's meant to be an invitation to say, for us to have a mutually satisfying relationship, here is what I need. And then to go from there.
So boundaries is one way.
So boundaries is one thing that can feel impossible. Naming our needs. And of course, this is what boundaries is all about too. It's one of the ways that we name our needs and then say, here's exactly what I mean by that. Another thing that can feel impossible is, and we're already naming this, but mutuality. It can feel like I will never be at a place in this relationship where I am equal, where my voice matters, where my heart matters, where my wants, my needs, where I matter as much as the other person. Powerlessness can cause us to feel that boundaries, our needs, and mutuality are just impossible. And that's why we're talking about this, because we want to invite people out of places of feeling powerlessness so that we can step forward into our relationships and showing up in ways that are different so that we can have these things that are part of what make life really good.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this and maybe you're getting stirred up, I know it can feel initially scary. Here's the thing: when you're ready, you'll be ready. But if it's something that you want to move towards, to where you want to create more mutuality, more mutual respect and desire and all of that, you're probably going to, I'll just say, when you are being unconsciously led by unhealed trauma, it does take somebody else to help you through that. And here's one reason why. Because that's pretty much always connected to shame, and shame paralyzes us. Shame keeps us in situations that we intuitively know are not good for us. But because of the shame, we don't think that we deserve or are worthy of mutual honor and respect and care. And so I'm thinking of when Jesus rose Lazarus from the dead. It's just what came up. Okay. He had to have someone help take off his grave clothes. He could not do that on his own. Right. He literally couldn't see. And so this is what we do. As we help people start taking off their cloaks of shame. They do start to feel more empowered to be able to start showing up for themselves. What an honor it's been. People who've helped us take ours off, and now we get to help take other people shame cloaks off.
And I want to just re-emphasize what you're saying. We have to have this. We can't really find our way out on a solo journey. Now, I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but I think
we believe all things are
part of what is true with trauma is that our belief systems are established, usually pretty early in life, and then our brain develops the neural pathways that keep us just repeating these same patterns because it is truly what we hold as our deepest beliefs. And so when a person feels like I'm not worthy to be treated better, they have all their reasons why they know that that is true. And there are real concrete reasons that they could point to, at least in general.
And we all have done things that we're ashamed of.
Right. And sometimes that goes back to, well, when I was 7, when I was 9, right? And because that's what our brain got stuck on. That is where the neural pathway was established. And so we're in desperate need of other eyes that see us and other bodies and hearts that can help contain how we will push back when someone says, well, wait a minute, you deserve more than that, for example. You deserve more than that. And we'll push back and say, oh, no. We need someone who has the capacity to say, oh, yes, let's talk about this. We have to have other eyes or we just can't get out of it.
Well, because the most powerful person that we believe is ourselves. I was telling someone the other day, even God, what God says over us doesn't have power over us unless we believe it. We have to believe it.
Well, for example, you are loved.
Right.
You are loved with a love that never fails. And yet, and that's written on almost every page of scripture.
Right.
In one way or another. And yet we don't believe it. And we don't believe it because of the stories that convinced us that we are not. Lovable.
We've made agreements. We've made agreements with the stories that made us feel and believe that we aren't loved. And we have evidence, right? Especially when we've been abused. Like those things were not loving. Therefore, we're not lovable.
Abused, and I'm going to also just say and neglected. Because that's I want to just say a word about that. And we do mention this from time to time, but childhood emotional neglect, there's been a lot of research that now shows that the impact of that on the body and the brain are as impacting as physical, verbal, emotional, sexual abuse.
And it's also harder to name. because you can't think of what
Yeah.
a bad thing that happened to you necessarily.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Sher, let's come back and do another episode because we named, that if you're in a situation where you're feeling powerless, it means that maybe you're having a hard time setting boundaries. You don't see your options.
There's no mutuality.
No mutuality.
Yeah.
Can we do one more and maybe
Yeah.
just have some more concrete ideas on what we can do?
What do we do to move from that stance of powerlessness and feeling maybe, and we haven't really talked about the sense of being victimized and not having power, and there's nothing I can do and I have no options and I'm the victim here. But how can we move from that place into a place where we begin to recognize that maybe I do have power and maybe I can utilize my power in a way that isn't going to be unsafe for me?
And I'm wondering if I'm glad that you're bringing up the victimization, because we did, I think, 2 episodes on victim mentality.
Yep.
And what I want to say is when someone is in a victim mentality, if we care about them and want to help them and they're coming to us, we don't shame them for being in a victim mentality.
Right.
We know there's a reason why they are.
Right.
And our heart is to help them come up out of that victim mentality. You shame someone for being in a victim mentality, it's not going to do anything to help them get out of it.
Right. And I'll just say one more thing about that since we're talking about victim. Nobody has a victim mentality who hasn't experienced victimization. There are reasons why.
Yeah, and just because you haven't seen it, you didn't witness it,
you
weren't there, doesn't mean it didn't happen.
That's right.
Okay,
Good.
Love you, friends.
Love you too.